Dr. Brad here. I want to talk about Brooks Koepka today because I watched the 4 days of the PGA Championship just recently last month in August of 2020, and there was some controversy around some of the things he said. And so we're here today to sort of clear some of that up and to address it and to, give a little bit of my perspective on it. Well, let's start with the premise that Brooks is just a little bit different, and that's okay, and that's cool. He comes from a little bit of a different background than many of the golfers on tour. He played hockey and baseball as a kid. Not everybody has that background, so he has a team sports background, which is relevant. The guy benches 300 pounds. I mean, other than Bryson DeChambeau, who looks like a behemoth this year. I mean, the guy looks like a beast. I think he's like 240 pounds at this stage, and he's driving the ball 340. Other than guys like that, and Dustin Johnson's a big, tall guy, but he's kind of lean. There aren't a ton of golfers that are sort of built like Brooks Koepka, where they're 6 feet, 205 pounds, and they're benching 300. Now, golf, as we all know, has gotten more and more athletic, and some of these guys like McElroy, who's roughly, 5'10", 160, and Justin Thomas, who's probably roughly 5'10", 160, and Sergio Garcia. Some of these guys hit the ball a long way and similar distances of Brooks Koepka, but they're not benching 300 pounds. The other thing about Brooks is he likes golf, clearly, but he doesn't love it in the same way that some guys seem to do, in the sense that he's willing to take, 6 weeks off in the off season and drink with his buddies and go boating and not necessarily hang out with other golfers. That's slightly different. He also played for 4 years on the European Tour. Now, there's been a lot said about that, and so we're not going to kind of go into that too much, but 2 years on the Challenge Tour and 2 years on the European Tour, that is a little bit different, and it's very, very cool because he's playing in Europe and playing in different cultures. He was also willing to do that body issue, where he's swinging nude. I mean, how many golfers on tour would be willing to do that? And then the other thing that's kind of cool about him is he does those little podcasts that not necessarily everybody does. And if you notice, he's a lot more comfortable in front of the camera when it's just guys shooting the shit, so to speak, than it is like someone putting a mic in his face and asking for some serious commentary. All right, so let's talk about Amanda Bellionis' interview after the third round, where Brooks Koepka is 2 shots back of DJ at -7, DJ's at -9.
Who's around you on this leaderboard when you're going for such a historic moment of 3 straight PGA championships? What is it going to take out of you tomorrow to get it done?
Just play solid golf. Just do what I've been doing. I feel like I'm right there. I just need a solid round. And, a lot of the guys on the leaderboard are, I don't think of one, or I guess DJ's only won one, but I don't know the other guys that are up there. But it's a lot of experience, I guess, is what I can bring to it, and know that I've been in this position quite a few times over the last couple of years, and just play well.
And there's a bunch of other golfers that he sort of like seemingly disparages, but what he was doing in the moment was basically looking at DJ, and he's sitting there going, I'm not looking at the people I'm tied with. He's basically saying, I'm only looking at people that are ahead of me when I'm going into Sunday, the final round. But it's not really what the media is trying to make it be, right? As if it was some giant big deal. When you think about it, it's true. Remember, Brooks Koepka has now won 4 major championships in the past 3 years. That's highly unusual, and he has a ton of self-belief and a ton of self-confidence. And even though he might be slightly injured, something that we're going to return to in a few minutes here. And truthfully, I know DJ just won the FedEx Cup, and he won the $15 million, and that's amazing. And he's won many more tournaments than Brooks Koepka has on tour. But DJ's only won one major, and he does have a history of not finishing on Sunday. In other words, when he's had the 54-hole lead, 3 other times he has not succeeded, and again, this would be the 4th time. Now, some of those rounds he's played well, and in all fairness, other people beat him. But when Brooks is making these comments, they're not out of bounds and they're not all that disparaging. They really aren't. You know, he's in the moment, he's thinking, well, DJ's only won one. That is both accurate and maybe at worst case scenario, it's a little bit of gamesmanship. So what? I mean, think about other sports.
I came back for the love of this, to come and shut this man up. A little rat, a little weasel, a little hard man in groups. I've met many of them, and that's it. I came back for the love of fighting and the love of war, and this I am going to truly, truly love, putting a bad beating on this little glass jaw rat.
I told you all that I was the greatest of all time. On a beat Sunday, listen, I told you today, I'm still the greatest of all time. Never again defeat me. Never again say that I'm going to be defeated.
I guess DJ's only won one, but I don't know the other guys that are up there.
That's like nothing in comparison. In a lot of ways, golf is a very conservative world. Now let's take a look at Brooks's comments prior to the tournament, meaning the 2020 PGA Championship at Harding Park in San Francisco. The way the golf course sets up eliminates pretty much half the guys. Now, what he's really saying here is, you know, the air is super heavy in San Francisco, the rough is thick, you've got to hit the ball a long way, and if you're not hitting the ball a long way, it's going to be really difficult. And that's pretty accurate, right? But then again, there are times when in major championships, people come out of nowhere, and so it's unforeseen. And so sometimes Brooks speaks in a way that seems to lack humility. It comes off at times as maybe a little bit cocky or even arrogant. I think it's perfectly fine, because if you think about it again, if we go back in time here, how many people have won 4 major championships in the past, in a 3-year span? Well, we have Rory McElroy, who did it 2011 to 14. That's pretty much the last person. He had a ton of confidence. He's got an amazingly sort of graceful style, and there's something super sweet about Rory McElroy. Not everybody's like that. Remember, Brooks is coming from a different background, right? So let's come back, though, to this concept of how a little bit of humility can go a long way, because, again, there are times when you never know. There are golfers that come out of nowhere that win major championships. Remember that famous 7-iron shot with Sean McKeel back in the 2003 PGA Championship? The cool part is I've watched a lot of these live, so when I go back and I look at these things, I'm like so amazed. It was just an amazing experience to watch him come out of number 169 in the world and win that championship, a major, with only 2 prior wins, one on the, like web.com tour or something like that. And then he never even won again, so you just never know. And then there's golfers like Ben Curtis, who won the 2003 Open Championship, same year, coming from number 396th in the world. How amazing is that? And no one will ever forget that chip in 1987 on the 11th hole at Augusta National at the Masters, when Larry Mize beat number 1 in the world, Greg Norman, in a playoff. So in other words, you never know, and a little bit of humility can go a long way. That said, I truly believe that Brooks Koepka was injured, had a knee injury. Now he's out of the US Open at this point. We're now, a few weeks past the PGA, and he's decided not to play the 2020 US Open because of knee and hip injuries. Well, he was having treatments that day on the golf course, right? So it's very possible that he might have held up and he might have won that thing had he not been injured. Instead, he shot a 4-over score round and he didn't do well. And he finished 29th in the 2020 PGA, and he looked really bad. And then the media was sort of suggesting that he kind of has a feud with Dustin Johnson just because he made that comment that Dustin had only won 1. And of course, the media sort of like hyping on that a little bit about how there was a headline that Dustin Johnson's $15 million FedEx Cup victory should put an end to this Brooks Koepka feud. There was no feud. You know, Dustin Johnson literally didn't really care. He just blew it off. He's like, whatever. And then let's look back on, you know, media hypes and, you know, things like that. Remember when Patrick Reed in 2014 made those comments about being feeling like he was a top 5 player in the world? Well, you know, at the time, he was just coming off a victory at the World Golf Championships at 23 years old. That was pretty special. Okay, maybe he was number 20 in the world, but he felt like a top 5 player. And in a lot of ways, that speaks to the self-confidence and the self-belief that these players need to be that good and to win under that kind of pressure. So I'm really not a fan of this sort of like thing about there's some feud. Maybe they weren't the best of friends to start, and maybe there was too much said of the fact that they worked out every day or most days in the week together for a long time and had the same trainer. Well, you know, Brooks is a super competitive guy, right? And he wants to win. He's going out there to win. So if that's the case, at times, even if DJ is a friend, at times he's a competitor and he wants to win. And he's not wired necessarily like Rory McElroy, who's more of like a really nice guy. You know, I'm a huge Rory McElroy fan. I think he's kind of a terrific human being. Maybe Brooks isn't as terrific, but he certainly is real. So let's talk for a moment about Rory McElroy's interview regarding Brooks Koepka's comments after the 3rd round.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't say it. It's different, right? It's a very different mentality that to bring to golf that I don't think a lot of golfers have.
And you can see him wince and everything because he's clearly uncomfortable with that kind of mentality. That mentality might be a little bit more of a team sports mentality, you know, us against them or whatever, and, you know, it's hyper competitive and we're there to win. And maybe there is some gamesmanship, but again, what's wrong with a little bit of gamesmanship in golf? I think there's something wonderful about the game of golf because of the history and the etiquette and just the nature of that it's a gentleman's game, right? But yet at the same time, you know, it is a hyper-competitive sport and people do want to win, and some of them are coming from a slightly different background than that sort of a little bit more gentrified background. You know, again, we've talked about Brooks Koepka, you know, having a team sports background. So when he orients towards golf, you know, he's there to win. And if we look back, Nick Faldo was the same way in the sense that, you know, he really wasn't that like likable when he was winning. You know, he was hyper focused, and he spent a bunch of years there when he won his 6 major championships where, you know, he wasn't all that liked in some ways. So we want to keep in mind that as enlightened as Rory McElroy seems to be, or probably is, that's wonderful, but not everybody's going to be like Rory McElroy. And we kind of need guys in the sport that, you know, bench 300 pounds and, you know, go drinking with their friends, and who knows? In other words, yeah, they, you know, they're not going to be perfect role models in some respects, but we want them to be real. Don't we want Brooks Koepka to be whoever Brooks Koepka is, to just be real and to be able to say so? Yeah, I wanted to beat DJ. Or I didn't really feel like DJ was, you know, tough enough to take me, even though I was 2 shots back. And he's willing to sort of, if you don't make him too uncomfortable, to just say how he thinks. Part of the problem and the challenge today is if you say what you think, people hype it or take it out of context or make it mean all this stuff, and then it's very hard for these guys to be totally real. And I'm a fan of the Brooks Koepka type that's willing to be real, especially if you give them the space to do so. So again, you know, I think, Rory, I think you're absolutely amazing and you might be enlightened, but Not everybody is. And Brooks likes to drink with his buddies, and he likes to go boating in the off season, and he's hyper competitive. It is what it is. Hey, I'm Dr. Brett.